Welcome to Learning Unlocked. I am your host, Brit. As an instructional specialist in Gilbert, Arizona, I am a total nerd when it comes to classroom strategies and educational pedagogy. Educators are the key holders to unlocking learning for students. Today, as always, my goal is to provide you with resources and tools, the keys, to enable and accelerate learning for all students. Thanks for joining me today. Let's get started. Before we get going on the interview today, I just wanted to do a quick reminder that if you have time to rate us and write us a review on Apple Podcasts, we would appreciate it. The more reviews and ratings we get, the more educators will see our podcast. So if you like what you're hearing and you think others would too, please head over and provide us a review. Thanks. Welcome back, key holders, to episode 16 of Learning Unlocked. Today, I am lucky enough to sit down with one of our high school science teachers, Tara Dale. She is a nationally board certified teacher and has taught both science and social studies in the 7 to 12 setting for 14 years. She earned her bachelor's of science in psychology and another in biology from Arizona State University and her master's in secondary education from the University of Phoenix. In addition to teaching, Dale is also an instructional coach and sits on the board of directors for Arizona's National Board Certified Teachers Network. If you think that's all, it's not. In 2014, she was a finalist for Arizona Teacher of the Year. Dale is also the co-author of the book we're actually going to be talking about today called The Science Teacher's Toolbox. She co-authored this with Mandy S. White, and today we're going to discuss the fresh and engaging and just transformative strategies that they have in this book. They have hundreds of practical ideas for teachers. And even if you don't teach science, I think there's a lot that can be transferred over into different content areas and different grade levels. So I hope you guys enjoy the interview with Tara. Hey Tara, I am so excited to have you on the show this afternoon. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. This is super exciting to meet with you.
Oh, I am so excited. I have your book in front of me. I've been paging through it. I am totally geeking out over it. I'm so excited. But you are a very busy woman. You are involved in a lot of things. So before we even start talking about this wonderful resource book you have for teachers, what do you do to relax, girl?
What does relax mean? Isn't that a forceful word?
No. Are you like one of those people that are like, I'm going to sleep when I'm dead?
Yeah, right? Like, that's not a bad plan. So, no, I think this year, especially with everything that's going on with COVID and hybrid versus virtual versus face-to-face and all the changes, I think this year out of any year is probably the most important for us to remember to take care of ourselves, right?
Yeah, and I've seen other teachers be like, I'm so sick of everybody telling me to do self-care, just give me less work. And I'm like, totally getting that. Like, I feel for them with that. What do you think about that? Do you think, like, do you do walks? Do you listen to music? Like, what do you think is the best way to like unwind after a day of teaching in this pandemic crisis?
Well, definitely exercise. That has helped me sleep better because I find that when I don't exercise, I wake up multiple times and then, you're tired and you're already maybe a little cranky. So I think exercising helps, but also I need to relax my brain. That's like my biggest thing because it is always turned on and I need to figure out how to turn it off again so that I sleep better. So okay, this is like, I love it. But it seems kind of odd, but I make like Hallmark cards. Like I make my own greeting cards.
Okay, I love you. Like to calm down, to calm your brain.
Yeah, so it's just a creative outlet. I don't have to follow any rules. It's just Yeah, it's just relaxing for me. Like this time of the year, it's December 2nd today that we're recording this. And, I might put on one of those romantic Christmas Hallmark movies in the background. And then, yeah, I just pull out my crafts and I just make cards.
Okay, I love that so, so much because I think everyone needs their little thing. Like, are you a crocheter? Are you, like for me, I love to dance. So I'll get up and like dance to music and, like with my kids or whatever. So I just think everybody needs to find their thing. I hate that self-care always seems to be like, get in a bath and blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't like baths. Like, I don't want to sit in dirt of my own and sit there. I don't
I'm
want to
with
do that.
you.
Okay. Anyways, you're just so busy. I just read through all of like your credentials and you just amaze me. You're who I want to be when I grow up. So, but let's get going on talking about the Science Teachers Toolbox. So you're representing you and Mandy, the co-author today, right?
Yes.
Okay. Because I did talk about Mandy S. White was the co-author, but she was okay with you doing the podcast. So talk to me about this resource. I mean, it is out now for science teachers. They can get it pretty much anywhere, right? That it's sold. I saw it was on Amazon. How do you think that it impacts student learning according to the next generation science standards?
Yeah, so that was actually one of the things that Mandy and I had to discuss at the very beginning of this project when we were asked to write the book, because did we want the book to be, this is how you teach how a volcano erupts, and this is how you teach, you know, the laws of thermodynamics? Like, we didn't want it to be that. We wanted every teacher from fourth to 12th grade to be able to use this book, regardless of what their standards are, regardless of what content they're supposed to teach. We wanted it to be applicable to that entire range of science teachers. So we do have some mentions of the next generation science standards, but we also are very aware that not every state adopted those standards. So we really focused on the big things. So the science and engineering practices, the cross-cutting concepts, of course, but even more so, something that's really near and dear to my heart is something that I coined a term called the skills for intentional scholars. And I always joke that if I was going to write a second book, it would be called, Are Your Students Mindless Robots or Intentional Scholars?
I love that. I would buy that.
Right? I don't want my kids just to do what I tell them to do. Like, that's not how the real world works. No, my principal doesn't come in and say, this is how you're going to teach this today and this is how you're going to differentiate. Like, I have to figure that out, right? Those are problems that I have to solve. So I came up with 3 skills that I believe every single human needs in order to be successful, regardless of whether they go into science or if you go into a creative business. If you're a stay-at-home mom, stay-at-home dad, it doesn't matter. Like, after high school, everybody needs 3 skills. So you need to be a good, effective communicator. You need to be a creative problem solver, and you need to be a good critical thinker. So every strategy that we give in the book is offering at least one of those 3 things to your students. So either they're practicing their communication skills, their problem solving skills, or their thinking skills. Because at the end of the day, that's exactly what science is, too.
Yeah, I mean, and I think I love that you said no matter what you do, I mean, you need these 3 skills. And I love that you we were talking earlier and you even have those 3 skills put up on the board and you kind of check off like which ones they're focusing on that day, even though they're doing something in science, they're also doing something um like life skills, right?
Yes, exactly. In fact, the way that this was came about was I was talking with a 7th grade class. And I think it was like my 2nd year teaching, and I was teaching the moon phases. And the kid's like, "When am I going to use the moon phases?" Well, I don't know. Like, I don't,
You're like, this is
I
a
don't
really good
know.
question.
Yeah, that's a great question. Where's my real life application to this? Now, the science standards say I have to teach it, but that's a great question. Like, why? And I think it's fair that kids ask us that question. When am I going to use this? And quite frankly, I think it's our responsibility as the adults to be able to answer that question. And I couldn't come up with a legitimate answer for that. And a lot of our standards, when they're fact based like that, are difficult because kids have their facts at their fingertips now. They're just a Google search away, right?
Right.
Um, but nothing online is going to teach them how to do these skills. But these are the skills you need to be successful in school, and even more importantly beyond school, in the quote unquote real world. So I rewrote my entire class in for seventh grade, and I said, you know what, I'm going to make sure that every day I'm practicing at least one of these three things with my kids. And I found that I was more successful if I overtly told them that this is what we're doing and this is why we're doing it.
Well, I mean, of course, because good teachers clarify how students can improve and why it's relevant.
Mhm.
I mean, we just know that from research. Can you say the three again, just for the listeners?
Absolutely. So it's effective communication, creative problem solving, and critical thinking.
Perfect. Yep. Because I think they're gonna think that's a great way to kind of go into your instructional planning. Like, okay, let's talk about these, relevant skills, and then let's look at our priority standards, and then now let's go. Because I think not only is that beneficial for the teacher to be able to answer those questions when they come up, but that the students can see that is so great for their clarity of their learning for sure. Um, in the book, you discuss, hundreds. Oh my gosh, the book is so thick. I don't want people to look at it and be like, I can't, because it's so good, you guys, because there's so many like tables and examples and images and so many great things in there. So don't be like put off by the size. But what got me most excited as a former high school teacher is that both of you embrace the ideas of hands-on learning, um, and not just for like younger kids, like secondary level can have hands-on learning. So here's the thing. What I have noticed in my time going in and out of several classrooms these last 2 years, that some teachers that are in those secondary grades are a little uncomfortable with this hands-on approach. It's not that they're against it. It's just like, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to make it accessible. Can you tell me more about why you guys felt like hands-on learning was a favorable addition to the science teacher's toolbox, but basically any teacher's toolbox as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. I heard a fellow teacher once tell me that students don't remember like your PowerPoints. Like, have you ever heard a kid go, oh my gosh, did you see Mr. Smith's PowerPoint? Slide number 17 was off the chain. And the answer is no, right? You never hear that. So I don't own a PowerPoint. I don't make them, and that's not how I teach it. And if you are just doing PowerPoints, are you practicing those three skills for intentional scholars? Probably not, right? Um, the comment I always make is, if all education is transferring knowledge from my brain to my student's brain, then quite frankly, you don't need me. And you could save millions of dollars by getting rid of the teachers, giving the kids their textbooks and just telling them to read. Because isn't that also just a transfer of knowledge? Like, we do so much more than that in a classroom. We are not just knowledge givers. We try to get kids to experience science. You got to do science to learn science.
Well, kids
So
have to do something to learn something. And I think a lot of teachers sometimes, they'll get to talking and they love their content or they love the story or they love whatever they're teaching and they forget, like, stop, the kids have to do something.
right,
So
right.
that they learn it so they remember it. Yep.
So what we did was we went out and did every strategy in the book. First of all, is research based, and we tried it in our classroom. Some of the things are specific that we've learned in other PDs that we just know is good teaching. Other strategies are ones that we've created based on research that we've done on our own. But everything that we have here, research proves that when students are responsible for doing something, their test scores increase. That the ownership is on the kids to learn, not the teacher to teach, right? Like that
Right.
old adage, you don't want to be the stage on the stage, you want to be the guide on the side, right?
Yeah. And, and well, when students make, you know, if they're more actionable in their learning and they are seeing learning as just more than a grade, they're seeing that they can experience learning and that failure is okay and there's different variables constantly changing and moving. I think it just becomes more challenging and more interesting for them. So
Yes,
I think, of course, their test scores are going to increase because they're making huge connections in their brains that they wouldn't normally make off of that, PowerPoint slide number 17 that just had that really cute GIF on it, you know? So, okay, so give me a couple examples from the book about just like doing science.
yeah, absolutely. Okay, so like two of my favorites. One of them is when we were teaching the engineering process. We don't just teach the process; we make the kids learn it by doing it. So we start off with, the very first step, and then we go to the second step, and then we go to the third. But the cool part about the engineering process is that it's not linear. You are constantly going back to previous steps. And so to show the kids that, to let them experience why that's necessary, at the older grades, we give the kids mouse traps. Of course, you have to teach them how to use it safely, right? Super fun. And they have to make a catapult. And so I give them, like, maybe a rubber band and some tape and cardboard and a plastic spoon and a mouse trap. And I'm like, okay, so the first thing you got to do is figure out, how do you use all these materials to make a mousetrap? So there's your creative problem solving, right? So then I give them a marshmallow after they think they have a good catapult, and I let them test it. And they find out that their first design usually is not such a great design, but that's okay because that's what the engineering process is, right? Like that old story about Thomas Edison and the light bulb, and he needed 1,000 tries. Same
Well, and
concept.
Hattie always says failure is our best friend, right? We
That's right.
can't improve unless we fail. I mean, we have to see those opportunities for feedback and learning and celebrate sometimes when we fail because now we know, hey, I have to go do this and fix this.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah. So it gives permission to kids to fail, and that's a good learning opportunity, not just from an educational perspective, but also from a science perspective. I always tell the kids it's okay to fail in science. In fact, those are usually the most famous scientists are the ones who made a mistake because that's how they learned something and advanced the field.
Right, that's awesome. And that's such a great point for kids to see that relevance of science and science class.
Yep. So after they make their catapults and stuff, and they think they have like the best catapult, after, trial and error, trial and error, trial and error, we give them challenges. So, how far can you get your marshmallow and who can get it the farthest? Or, we'll make a bullseye and see if they can get it for accuracy. So, there's usually some challenges behind it. And of course, they're always going back and trying to improve their design. So I'm not just telling them what the engineering process is, but I'm letting them experience it so that, like you said, they become more interested. It's boring to listen to teachers talk and drone on all day long, but it's super engaging to play with mousetraps and
Well, right, it's active learning, right? And you're using those hands-on experiences, which and that's not to say that now after they've gone through this process, they could do a writing component where now they explain what they think the engineering process is.
that's
And
right.
then it gives you an opportunity to give feedback on their, what if that is the correct engineering process based on whatever the standard is or whatever you're teaching. But they probably are pretty accurate because they've gone through it themselves using these mousetraps.
Right, yeah. And so you're right. Kids just learn more when they do more. It can't
Hmm.
it can't be us doing all the work. In fact, I tell the kids all the time, I'm like, I've taken this class 16 times now. It's your turn to be the kid. You be the student.
Right. Totally, totally, totally. Okay,
Right.
and then you have the 4x4 reading strategy. Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Yes. So I went to a PD that had like a placemat activity, and I altered it and created this 4x4 strategy that I love, especially because the majority of the students that I teach at the high school level now are co-taught classes. So many of my students have some kind of special needs. So what we do is I give them an article and I put them in groups of 4. In the book, we talk about how to differentiate if you don't have an exact, you know, an exact number of 4, like if it's not divisible by 4. So we
Right,
give
right,
you
right,
an
right,
alternative. Yeah. But essentially what you want to do is you get the kids in around a table, and on the table there's a big piece of butcher paper, and it has 4 main points that you want the kids to understand when they walk away from the article. So each kid stands at one point on the paper so that they have one concept in front of them. And you give them like maybe 2 minutes to read the article and be able to find something to write on the paper about that specific concept. And then you have them each turn. So, like, maybe they go counterclockwise. So now they
Yeah, they
have a
just rotate
new,
around.
yeah, exactly. So now they have a new topic in front of them. So they read the same article a second time, but now they have a new purpose. They're looking for that topic.
Mm-hmm.
And they have to write something that was not previously written by another student.
Love that. Yeah.
So, maybe I give them like 2.5 minutes to do it, right? Because they have to find something unique. But you keep doing this, and then that way the kids have read the article 4 times, and
Mm-hmm.
they can have a really rich conversation about their reading comprehension because they have these notes that they took as they read it. And they can see, oh, well, what did Maggie notice that I didn't notice?
Right. Because now they have they look at them through obviously your purpose. Like it's still direct instruction. Like I feel like a lot of teachers think direct instruction is just me up there talking to the kids. No, as a teacher, you have given them the points like that they need to kind of focus on, like purposes, but the students are doing the heavy lifting of the thinking when because they're reading the article and they're coming up with their own major points based on that purpose that you've directed them towards, right?
Yes.
See, and I think I mean, how awesome is that for just even like literacy and science? Okay. And now that we know this article so well, we can have deeper and richer academic conversations surrounding it.
Yeah, and it's a great opportunity for kids to practice their vocabulary because there's so much tier 3 vocabulary in science.
Mm-hmm.
So if you find a really rich vocabulary article, and in the book, we even provide examples of how to teach vocabulary in a very direct way. And we also provide websites where teachers can go to find free articles that are really rich and written at the Lexile level for their students.
Oh, that's so helpful because it's so hard sometimes when you don't have a textbook that's, from 2019 or whatever
Mhm.
to
Amen,
get those.
sister.
Right? You have to figure out where you're getting things from and you want to make sure it's of high quality. So in the book, just to have that resource is fabulous, I think, for teachers because it's just that one less thing they have to do.
Right.
Because, that's what we just as teachers don't have is we just don't have time. We want to do active learning. It's just we need someone to show it to us. Like those two strategies are perfect examples and any teacher could take that 4x4 strategy in any subject area and use it.
Yes,
So,
exactly.
yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so this book covers everything from like I was looking through it, setting up labs to writing lab reports to incorporating technology into the science classroom. But what I wanted to really hone in on was just like how you access student learning, especially those, like you said, at different ability levels with like such a variety of learning experiences to assess. So I just like really found that super duper interesting. I mean, I I'm sure a lot of science teachers would be like, I want to read the lab report one, which I'm sure they will buy the book and they can read that chapter. But I wanted to talk about just that differentiation and how you kind of set that up.
Absolutely, yeah. So every chapter is set out the same way, so that there's a very easy to read format, and it's easy to find what teachers are looking for. It wasn't written in the intention that you sit down and start with page 1 and go to page 2 and go to page 3. It's very much, you might start at page 73 and then go to page 42 and then go to page 260 to 69, and that would be okay, you know.
Right.
Yeah. So anyhow, so each chapter has a section that is titled differentiation for diverse learners.
Okay.
So, specifically with assessment, like you managed, there were 2 chapters that are dedicated to student assessment. So, there's chapter 15 that's called Strategies for the Beginning and Ending of Class, and that really focuses on formative assessment. And then
Mm-hmm.
there's chapter 17, which is called the Strategies for Assessing Student Learning, and that really focuses on summative assessment.
Awesome.
Yeah, so within each of those chapters, there are specific strategies of what you can do to support students with diverse needs. And that could be, a student who has a special eds need, maybe they have a IEP, or a student with a medical condition and maybe they have a 504 plan. Maybe it's a student whose second language is English, or even maybe you have a student who is an advanced learner.
Right.
Yeah, and you need to do some kind of enrichment for that student. So throughout the book, that's sprinkled, but specifically within assessment, those are your big 2 chapters. We have found that because Mandy, my co-author, she's a special education teacher. In fact, that's how we met, is that we co-taught together the first couple of years. And she's amazing at differentiation. I learned so much from her. And one of the things that we would do, because we don't want to give kids multiple choice tests all the time,
Well,
uh,
right. Yeah.
right? Because and it's not about the guessing. The problem that I have with multiple choice questions, or like true false, is that you're either 100% right or 100% wrong.
Well, it's kind of like that surface level learning, right? It's just it
Yeah.
either yeah, it's just either it is or it isn't.
Right. And I deeper into what my kids have learned, and how unfair of me to give them a 0%, even though maybe they learned 50 or 70 or 80% of that concept. So I like short answer um, assessments instead, because I can see where their thinking is and I can give them credit for what they did learn instead of this all or nothing. But the problem is that a lot of students who are SLD, they have a specific learning disability, their disability is in writing. So if they're writing short answer questions is it their disability that's keeping them from being successful, or is it the fact that they haven't learned the concept, and how do you know? So Mandy used to set up sentence starters or writing frames for
Right.
these
Oh,
students.
girl, I love me a good sentence stem or a writing frame.
Right.
I am all about that. So you just made me like super excited. Okay, keep going.
Yeah, I love that. So she would set those up for the kids, and especially even with our students who are learning English, that would help kick their thoughts off too, because at least they knew where to begin. So many kids, especially if you have a high anxiety during a test, are like, I don't even know where to start.
Like the blank papers just staring at them and they're like, "Ah, it's winning. The paper's winning." Yeah,
Right, poor kids, like, oh my gosh. And I don't want their anxiety to be what I'm testing. I want their knowledge to be what I'm testing. So
absolutely.
Amanda used to do that. And we talk in the book in grave detail and give some really great examples of what sentence starters are and what writing frames are.
See, that's perfect. And so that way that those can really help those learners, I think that are at all ability levels. I mean, I I've taught sentence stems or discussion stems or whatever, K-12, and everybody looks at me like, you teach this all the way through kindergarten, all the way through 12th. I'm like, yes, because sometimes all a kid needs is like 4 words and then they
Yes.
go like, and then
Mhm.
it's just, they don't know how to begin. And if they get enough sentence starters throughout their school career, it will eventually become habit or more natural or whatever. I think if we did it more consistently, um, as teachers, and weren't so like, I don't know if people think it's like cheating them, or I don't know. I don't get it really. But if we use more writing frames and sentence starters and mentor texts and things like that, kids would be more confident in just their writing ability. And so then that wouldn't hinder them in when they're trying to prove what they've learned, right?
Yes, absolutely. And sometimes, kids don't mind saying, I stink at writing, which just breaks my heart. Like, why are you so comfortable with that statement?
I know, right?
Right? But if that's going to make them a better writer, and you know more about what's in their brain and what they've learned, and even more importantly, where they're struggling so that you can fix it before a summative test, I mean, how powerful for a kid. And now you start building their confidence, so they're more likely to take risks in your room.
Mhm. Yep. Well, and now they're feeling, I mean, they're feeling like, okay, I'm a decent writer and I'm really doing great in science. So their self-efficacy when they walk in your door is huge. So now you've got their attention because you're doing not only hands-on active learning experiences, but you're also kind of promising them in a way that like a, it's okay to fail in here. B, it's okay to not always be perfect. But what matters the most is that you walk away with knowledge. And I don't think that's how most kids feel when they walk into a classroom.
Sadly, I totally agree with you.
I know I feel bad saying that, but I just, I remember teaching and saying, I don't really like kids would be like, what's my grade? I'm like, I have absolutely no idea. I said, I will have to look it up in the grade book. And they're like, oh, and I'm like, because honestly, I really care about like, can you just instead of asking me what your grade is, can you just like I just stopped putting grades on stuff like until the end. I would like give them back things and be like, we would some a couple like two things of feedback, and then we would go over some mentor texts or whatever because I was English, and then after they revised and whatever, then I would grade it because as soon as I put a grade on it, I felt like the students were like, and my learning is done. Like, no, like the learning is not over when the grade is placed.
That's a great idea. I love that.
It just drove me crazy. So like they finally got used to that idea of, oh, she's not going to grade this for, I mean, she graded it. She looked at it. I mean, I definitely gave them feedback. It was just, it was short, it was chunked, and they had to then go look at things. And I would speak to them about like, here's what I was looking for, or here's an example of a student who did this well. Now let's look at yours. Okay, now go fix it. And they would do it and it would be better. And it was way better than me fixing the errors for them, I guess. And then them just forgetting.
Well, like you said, you learn more from your mistakes.
You do. Okay, so you have summative assessment, learning goals and skills, which our district is really moving towards the learning goals, targets, success criteria, which I love. I'm really excited about because I think that's great for all kids as it brings clarity. Do you have anything about that you want to speak to about how that helps with students that have diverse ability levels?
Yeah, so it is fascinating to use learning goals and skills in the classroom, especially with students that have diverse needs. Oh gosh. Okay, so for those listeners who aren't familiar with what these are, let me summarize this really quickly.
Yeah, that's
So
true. Go.
yeah,
That's good. Good job.
so so you have a unit learning goal that is usually pretty complicated and will take you many weeks to teach. And what you do is you break the goal down into mini learning steps. So usually you have 4 steps, but there are different models with different numbers of steps. And quite frankly, kids don't care how many steps you have. The idea is how you use the steps. So this is all formative assessment, so none of it goes in the grade book. And the idea is that at the beginning of the units, the kids don't know anything, right? And I always tell the kids, if you already know this, then why the heck are you here,
Yeah.
right?
What are we doing? Or it's a great way to assess them. Like if on the scale everybody's on a 2, we're like, oh, okay, well maybe we need to adjust the scale and co-author it a little bit.
Right? Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, those pre-tests can be really useful for that.
Right.
So hopefully everybody kind of starts at the beginning, at step 0, where they don't really know too much. Maybe they have a little bit of background knowledge, but they aren't really bringing too much to the table yet. And so you teach. So you teach your thing, you have them do their activities, and then you give them a formative assessment and see if they learned the first part of your learning goal, that first step. And if they have, then they move to the next step. If they haven't, then they stay there. And what becomes powerful is when you have kids track their movement and you add to it what kind of efforts they've put into it. So what I do is I have the kids fill out, it's a little half sheet of paper and a copy of it is in the book. So it's just a half a sheet of paper. It's a form, and they're graphing, so you can practice their graphing skills with them. And it's a bar graph that they're making. And every time we do a formative assessment, they add a new point on the bar graph to show where they are in these steps. If they're not moving the way you want them to move, then what's really powerful as the teacher is I know exactly which kid is struggling with exactly which concept. So I can offer some kind of intervention with that child so that they can catch up with the rest of the class. What's powerful on the student side is I put the ownership back on them. So if they moved on the step, I ask them on the form, they have to fill it out, and it says, what'd you do? Like, yeah, sure, I might be a great teacher, but that doesn't mean you're going to do well. Like, there's something you did
Yeah.
to own this learning. What did you do? And we give them examples. I paid attention. I did my homework. I asked my learning partner questions. I took good notes. I did, whatever
My catapult went the furthest.
I didn't give up. Right? That's
Right.
a great one. I love those social
Oh,
emotional.
I love that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And then the kids who aren't moving in the steps, I ask them, okay, so what can you do differently? Like, so whatever you're doing now isn't working because you didn't learn this information, which is okay. We still have many weeks until we take the summative test that goes in the grade book. But in the meantime, what are you going to do differently so that you do learn this information? And again, putting some of the ownership back on them so that when I do an intervention with them, they know why we're doing the intervention and they know that they have to do something different too in order to learn that information. So the feedback I've gotten from kids is they love learning goals and skills. At first, they're super mad about them.
Well,
Because
because it's different, from what they've been used to. Yeah.
absolutely. And it's really honest feedback about them.
Well, and they have to give it sometimes. I mean, and here's the thing. I really, truly, truly, truly believe that students generally want to improve. They want to get better.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't think we give them the language to tell us where they get stuck. So when we give them that language, like you said, and I've seen your form and I've seen it used because you're lovely and you've shared it with other people in the district. I've seen it used in English. I've seen it used in other content areas. So this is not something that is just for science. Kids, they do better because they can see it. It's visual. It's clarity for them. And it's a sense of, I do want to improve. And so when you do this intervention with me, I don't want to be stuck here. I want to improve and move forward. So I think that's awesome. Okay. So now as a teacher, I'm like totally on board. I'm listening to this. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go buy this book, but if our students and possibly many teachers need this now more than ever, I think, because they just need something like they can just take and use right away. You know what I mean? Like, and so what are some just simple sample engaging instructional strategies that are easy that they could do like tomorrow after listening to this that will help hook and help students learning stick with them? Like just make them want to rush to science class or gear up for the science portion of the day.
Absolutely. Okay, I got three really quick things. So,
I'm totally good with three really quick things because that's what they want. They want quick and simple, I think, right now in life, especially we're recording in December, but this will come out in January-ish, February-ish. But yes.
yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes. Right now, quick is nice. Right.
Yeah. But I think anytime you can have something anytime you can pull something out of your toolbox, I think that's easy that you can just remember quickly if you're seeing a lesson derail or something is good.
Right, right. Okay, so the first one is I always give the students control in my classroom. I ask questions that don't have right or wrong answers. And instead of grading them on their answers, I grade them on how well they justify their answer. So, as an example, you could have kids create like a website. Google Sites has these great free interactions,
Mm-hmm.
and kids
Yep.
answer the question, are dams constructive or destructive? I don't know. And you make them choose one. They can't be like both. Don't let them do that. You have to choose one, right? And there's no right or wrong answer because the answer is both, but they just have to justify it. Another great example, I love this one, is what is the next human adaptation? And they either have
Mm.
a debate in class or they could write a persuasive essay, however you want them to do it. And again, I mean, I don't have the magic 8 ball to tell you how humans are going to adapt in the future, but kids just have to justify it.
Right, and that's what you just want from them. You want them to have to do some critical thinking and, right, those life skills. If we go back
Yep.
to those from the beginning of the podcast, what what are they having to deeply think about? We don't want those surface level things all the time. Of course, you're going to have to hit your quadrant A surface level stuff, right?
Right.
But we want to get them to those higher levels of thinking. This just made me think of, I think you would love the podcast Flash Forward. It is about, like, every single episode is like random, like, what could the future hold in different areas of science.
Oh,
I
I got to
think
write
you
that down. Flash forward.
Yeah, write it down. I like it really, it's so fun. I mean, the topics on there are super duper interesting, and I'll link it too when we do the show notes for this podcast, because it's been one of the fun ones for me to listen to. But I think students, even if they listen to like an episode and then had to do something like a debate or an essay or a website off of that, if it fit in with your learning goals and skills, that would be super awesome, because they would have to justify it, their answers. So that's awesome. Okay, what's another quick one that you have?
Okay, so having them solve real world problems is incredibly engaging. I've done 2 projects with kids. I'm just going to mention one real quick, but they're both in the book. My first one that I did was a pizza box challenge. So I had a group of 7th grade students one year. It was just one class, and gosh darn it, those kids were bright and they were thirsty for knowledge. So I knew I needed to do some kind of enrichment project with them. And previously that summer, I was kind of thrown off by the fact that pizza boxes are made out of this corrugated cardboard that's totally recyclable. But because it has grease on it, you can't recycle it. And so I thought to myself, okay, well, what if I ask the kids, these 12-year-old little minds, to redesign the pizza box and
Love it.
make it recyclable? Now, I don't know if that's possible. And that part is super intimidating. But one thing I've learned by doing these real world problems is that I don't have to be the expert. I'm just there to guide kids towards resources and tools. They have to become the experts.
See, and I like that because it bothers me that I have to throw it away.
Right? I know it like breaks my heart.
It really is. So
However,
I love that you just said, like, that's a real world issue that totally bugs me. And my daughter and I were talking about that the other day, like rinsing out, like how well we have to rinse out the milk carton and all those things, because we want to recycle, we want to do those things, and the pizza box totally frustrates us.
right,
So
it
I love
is.
that activity.
Well, and just as a side note, by the way, they did design a pizza box that is recyclable, completely recyclable. They invited about 20 different pizza companies to come in. They all dressed up in their Sunday best and they gave a presentation to the companies that showed up. I think 14 came. Um, and every company was on board with using their new pizza box, except the kids found out in their experiment phase that in their new box, the pizza was a little, like, I don't want to say soggy, but like it had a certain moisture content to it that changed the texture of the pizza. And the companies are like, if you can solve that, then we will invest in your invention. How cool is that?
That is so cool. I mean, and how great for kids to feel like they're giving back to their communities, to their worlds. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
that's what they want. They want to feel like that's what education is. That's what it should be. Okay, really quick sidebar. Ready?
Yeah.
Flash forward. So every day, every time they do a description, it says, "Today we travel to a future where you can sell your personal data directly to a company to get a better deal on a car, a house, or a latte. What could go wrong?" Isn't that fun?
What could go wrong?
What could go wrong? Okay. All right. So I also love that you incorporate art and music into science. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, there's an entire chapter into that because there's a lot of movement to go from STEM to STEAM, and the difference is that A, which stands for art. So chapter 15 focuses on art and kinesthetic movement, and so when we were teaching astronomy, um, at the ninth grade level, we had the kids rewrite Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star because the song was written well before we knew what stars were. So think about it, right? Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, how I wonder what you are. No,
Oh,
we
right.
don't.
Yeah.
We totally know what you are. You're a big ball of gas, right? And by the way, they don't twinkle, they're not little, and they're spheres, they're not stars.
That's
So,
awesome. So they
yeah.
were able to like look at something that they've heard all of their lives
Mhm.
and rewrite it.
Yeah, we had them rewrite the entire stanza. So the whole song is, out on a web page, but we put it in the box, or we put it in the toolbox in the book. And we even put a couple of stanzas in there as examples of what kids have done. And yeah, we just had them rewrite the song. And then for extra credit, if they wanted to perform it in front of class. So kids bring in, their guitars or, maybe they record it at home on a piano or something. So it's super fun. They get to be musicians.
One, that's awesome, and that's I love that. I love anything, and that's mnemonics too. I mean, one day they'll sing that song to like their child, and it'll be hilarious.
Yeah.
That child will get the real version of Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. Watch out. Okay, and you said there is a secret chapter that the listeners get access to. Is this like correct?
It is. So I sent you the link so that you can add it to the podcast.
Woohoo! Yay!
Yep. So the link goes to the publisher, and if your listeners go to the left hand, you scroll down a little bit, and on the left hand side, they're going to see a series of different words like table of contents, reviews, so on and so forth. One of the links is called series, and if they click on that, there is a secret chapter number 19 that is only available online. It is completely for free. They can download it, and it offers 3 specific lesson plans of how to incorporate microscopes, Bunsen burners, and digital scales or beam balances in their classroom.
So they can get a little taste of the book first and see kind of how it's formatted a little bit and then be like, okay, yeah, I need this in my life, which I think is
Yeah,
awesome. So thank you for
yeah.
giving us access to that. Okay, so we're going to wrap up. We're at 44 minutes. Holy cow, this went by super fast. Okay, you hit so many of my personal buttons when you discussed all these wonderful ideas because I just, I'm such a geek when it comes to just strategies in general. But not only do your strategies enhance prior knowledge, but they also promote a culturally responsive classroom. How do you feel these strategies all rolled together create an educational formula, like for science, that is culturally responsive and considerate of students of all ability levels?
Yeah, so throughout the book, we talk about culturally responsive classrooms, but we do have a chapter that also focuses specifically on it. It's chapter 14. And, in researching for the book, I kept looking for like a quick strategy to turn my classroom into culturally responsive. And it turns out there isn't one.
Nope.
Nope, it's not how it works.
That's not how it works. I know. And it's so funny because everyone's like, I'm going to be culturally responsive this year. I'm like, mm-hmm. But it's really hard. It's a lot harder, I think, than we think it's going to be. Yep.
Right. And it really is teacher driven, um, in making a student centered classroom. So we, we did a lot of research focusing on a lot of specific researchers who are very much, um, how do I want to say, like they're in the forefront of this field, right? They're the driving motivational force behind this field. And what we found is that a culturally responsive classroom is really about the teacher and the beliefs that the teacher has about the kids. So the first thing is that they have to kids have to feel valued. So you have to create a culture in your room where every single kid, all kids regardless, feel valued. All students have the opportunity to be successful. All students feel as though they belong, and that students are seen as assets and not deficits.
That's a huge. I mean, and also, I mean, it's little, but even just being like, how do you pronounce your name? What would you like to
Yes.
be called? Those are some of the types of things that, looking back, I would just read through my roster and I would call a kid, Cameron. That's my daughter's name, but but maybe she wanted to be called Cammy or Cam, like, and so, but I just didn't ask, I mean, so those are the types of things, like, or making sure you pronounce their name correctly so they feel valued, so they feel like they belong. So it is really teacher driven with that mindset, but then students can also start to pick up on that, I think, as well. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so keep going. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, no, that's perfect. Yeah, that's a great example. And that's a good one because every once in a while I'll get a student and I will screw up their name for the first couple of weeks of school, but I always pull them aside and say, "I need you to keep correcting me. Like this is important to me that I pronounce your name accurately and I want you to keep correcting me because I'm going to get it right." And what a cool way to tell a kid that you're important.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're building community. I pronounced a kid's name wrong almost the entire year, and he didn't tell me. And
Oh,
I felt so, I mean, I literally cried. I was like, "Why didn't you say anything?" And he was like, "Oh, it's not that big of a deal." I'm like, "It is to me, and it should be to you. This is your name." Like, I was so upset. I was like, "Don't ever let anybody call you something else again." Like, and so for the rest of the year, I was like totally like, on it, right? But it took another student to say, "Miss Bingle, that's not how you pronounce it." And I'm like, Wait, what?" Like, I was so shocked. So, anyways,
but that's a perfect response, right? Because and that kind of goes into it. Like, we all make mistakes, we all have our own biases, but we have to become aware of them so that our biases don't drive policy in the classroom. And that means we have to get to know kids on an individual basis. It means that we have to provide every single student with the opportunity to grow and learn, and then connect with people in their community. It could be leaders who are people of color, scientists who are female, scientists who are disabled, or leaders who are disabled. Like, kids should be able to see themselves in the examples that you bring into your classroom because every kid needs to feel safe to grow and learn.
totally. I totally agree with you for sure. And I love, I mean, I do feel like learning goals and scales and success criteria and active learning and all those things roll into this. But they only work super well if we're in that culturally responsive environment. And I think it's more than just building relationships like, oh, my kids like me. It's no, my kids feel safe with me. They feel safe to fail. Feel safe to be creative. They feel safe to be curious and ask me silly questions like, why do we have to learn the moon phases? Right? I mean, see, I love that kid. Like, I would have, I just did not grow up in a time where you asked a teacher a question. You just sat and you listened and you took your notes, you took your test, and you moved
We were
on.
mindless
And
robots. That's right.
yeah, we were totally mindless robots. And so things like this, your toolbox, your book, your activities, your ideas, they just get me so excited. And I think it's because I have young kids and I want them to be in classrooms like yours and other teachers I know who really do embrace all of these mindsets, because I want them to have those life skills, which I think we should just really quickly before we wrap up, remind everybody those effective communication, critical problem solving, and critical thinking. Like, ultimately, that's what we want. We want them to come out with those skills and hopefully some empathy and compassion and, courageousness. Like, that's kind of what we want. They get some science and math and English along the way. But if they have those things, they're a strong human being. They're gonna make it.
Amen, sister. Amen. I love geeking out with you about this stuff, Britt. I could talk to you for hours.
I know we could talk for hours. Well, we have talked for an hour. We could talk for hours about all kinds of things. I geek out over. I love research and pedagogy, but I also just love seeing it in action as well. And so, thank you so much for coming on today. If listeners want to learn more from you, where can they find you online? Where can they stalk you a little bit? Because obviously they're going to go out and buy your book now, but where can they find you?
Okay, so I'm finally on Twitter, if you can believe that. Like, I feel like I'm not an old lady anymore.
Woo!
Um, so I am at Tara C. Dale.
Okay, and I will put that on the show notes too, so everybody can follow you. And are you posting, is it like your personal, or are you posting like kind of like pictures of science activities, or kind of what is the Twitter handle doing?
It is only about about like my educational industry and experience. I do not use it for personal uses.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Okay, because sometimes people have both, so I just wanted to make sure that listeners knew if they followed you, they were going to get some science-based activities and
definitely.
professional stuff. So that's awesome. Well, Tara, seriously, I have so enjoyed this conversation with you, and thank you for sharing so many strategies with our listeners today that not only are awesome for science, but I think are awesome for all teachers, which will hopefully in turn be awesome for all students.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was a delightful way to spend an hour.
Yeah, especially in the afternoon after you've taught all day. Thank you.
It was a good day. It was a good day.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Learning Unlocked and finding out more about the Science Teacher's Toolbox by Tara Dale and Mandy S. White. If you are listening today as a GPS educator, you can receive PD recertification credit by visiting our Employee Hub page and navigating to Professional Growth and then Digital PD courses. Just a reminder that we are on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at GPS Prof Growth. That's GPS PROF GROWTH. For more information or resources from this episode, please visit our website at learningunlocked.libsyn.com/website. We are distributed by Libsyn to Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Audible, and Amazon Music. Episodes are also available on our PGD YouTube channel under playlists. Our intro and outro music is licensed from Melody Loops. Thanks again, key holders. Keep unlocking curiosity, creativity, and innovation with your students. Stay kind and courageous, and I'll see you next time.